What is up, Breakthrough Success listeners? Marc, the podcasting coach here, helping people to launch, grow, and monetize their podcast. And when a lot of people think about finances, they think about investing, stocks, and real estate, and just being able to build up wealth over time. But one thing that people do not think about enough is the personal financial success. So what are the big things you want to achieve in your life? What are some of your life goals? And how can finances help you get there? That is the idea of personal financial success. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Our guest who joins us today helps business owners and entrepreneurs achieve financial freedom. He was named to the Investopedia Top 100 Financial Advisors of 2019 and wealthmanagement.com 2019 Thrive list of fastest growing advisors. Our guest is a senior wealth manager and financial planner at Watts Capital and a writer and editor over at Planning to Wealth. Our guest who joins us for this episode is none other than David Flores Wilson. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mark. Happy to be here and to talk to you and your audience.
David, I'm so happy to have you on Breakthrough Success, and thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're working out, driving somewhere, wherever you are. Thank you for choosing Breakthrough Success and this interview where we are going to help you achieve personal financial success. And I think that so many people, they think about, wealth accumulation and saving up money and then the whole retirement, but never really using that money. So I'm wondering if you could talk about how do we find this balance of investing and building up our wealth while leveraging some of the money to achieve like personal life goals, dreams, and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark. I think, oftentimes it's such that, people are, saving, doing their jobs, running their businesses, without sort of a plan in place. And I really think that financial planning generally can really, not just enable financial success, but, personal success on many different levels. And so, I think that the fundamental piece of that really is to, what are your values, right? What's most important to you? And, that I think is an exercise everyone should really, take seriously, set aside a half an hour, 45 minutes, and kind of write, everything that's important to you. And, maybe you write them on, 20, 30 sheets of paper, little Post-its or something like that. And then you narrow it down, down to 20, 15, 10. And so you kind of have a real sense of, okay, well, these are the 5 values that are most important to me. And, recognizing that, those values are going to change over time. And, you take those values and then from there, you start to set up goals to help you achieve what's most important to you. And then, the third piece of that is, aside from the values and the goals, is to also, well, what are you doing in terms of your financial behaviors, right? So that's the saving, investing, spending, and so forth. And so I like to think of, the best way to achieve this personal financial success is to have this alignment between the values, between what your goals are, and then what you're kind of doing day to day in terms of those financial behaviors.
And I mean, it is like having that day-to-day approach and having that plan in place gives you that framework, gives you that ability to say, these are the actions that I have to do to reach my goals. And the interesting thing about the concept of personal financial success is it's not just saving and investing a bunch of money. It's if you want to do something fulfilling, if you want to go on some travel, I mean, those are different options presented to you. And I do think there are some people who, two sides, people who they just want to spend. But I think there's also a lot of people who they feel guilty about not investing that extra dollar. So how can we be okay with rewarding ourselves personally time to time without going overboard, but without feeling guilty about not investing either?
Sure. I mean, I would say that, when people are making progress, there's sort of 5 levers of financial activities you can do, right? You can save, you can invest, you can protect your money, through insurance and other things like that. and then you manage debt correctly, and then minimize taxes. And so, when I think about those sort of 5 areas, it's impossible to do all 5 of those things, right all the time. And so, I think that people shouldn't beat themselves up if they're not doing everything perfectly, but getting 3 or 4 of those things right most of the time, that's when we see people build real wealth and achieve what they're trying to accomplish. And so, I think it's about being a little mindful about the spending. We only have so much self-control, and you can't kind of beat yourself up about every expense that doesn't kind of fit with your long-term goals. But I think if we get the big things right, in terms of maybe the right approach is to really look at expenses, whether that's through an app like Mint, or just going through an Excel spreadsheet and creating and categorizing all your expenses. And then, okay, what are the biggest categories? And then just, start at the top and see, well, can I cut there? I sort of like that approach rather than starting from the bottom up, where, people are like, okay, well, cut out the one, the trip to the Starbucks every day, and after a year, you'll save X amount. I think I like to kind of flip that on its head, and let's focus on the big things like, ways to minimize taxes, or, reducing your rent, or I think see a lot of people sort of, buy a house that might be such a big part of their budget. I think that's sort of a way to impede sort of real growth in your net worth, if you kind of do things like that.
And it's interesting you mentioned the bigger expenses, because there are a lot of people who they will say, cut the Starbucks, get your own coffee machine, make your own coffee, you save a ton of money. But the bigger expenses like the house, the car, the taxes, those are the bigger expenses where if you make progress there, you will immediately see the effects. Like if you cut a trip to Starbucks, like we're talking maybe $7 a day, depending on what you get there. That's good to like have that extra, but it's not life-changing. But to, have a smaller house or not a luxury car, I mean, those things are going to have a much bigger impact on your finances. And I think part of the reason people opt against, like, a smaller house or things like that is ego, because there is this chart, this whole idea where if you get a raise at your job, or you just make more money, you will want to buy a bigger house. You will want the fancier car. So how can we just not let that stuff get in the way? Like if our income rises, not be tempted to buy bigger just for the sake of having bigger.
Yeah, I think it's it's an emotional response, right? So and it's only natural that you'd want to go out and reward yourself for the hard work you're doing in your business or job, and when you sort of hit another income level, to say, okay, well, now I deserve a bigger apartment or a nicer car. And I think that first step is sort of recognizing that that's a natural emotional reaction, but to go back and say, hey, what was the plan, right? So, and I think that's the benefit of sort of having a written plan that says, okay, well, this is what we're going to do before these life events happen. And so that way you're focused on the bigger picture, which is, okay, well, I want to, have kids and put them through college, and, not retire at 65, 68, but retire at, 58 or 59. And so when you have that plan in place and you've run the numbers on what it takes to get you there, to achieve financial freedom and to achieve, a certain level of expenses in the future based on, that will be paid for by these different sources of income, then, you really are going to be more cognizant on a day-to-day basis. And you'll know that, sort of, if you get an annual bonus every year, well, it's, that like, okay, well, if the bonus comes in January, I should reward myself with X percent. I should put, Y percent away in this account towards retirement, and, a different amount towards, if you have kids and their education. And so the plan dictates what the spending will be, but the plan has to also be realistic. That that we're human beings, that we need to spend money on entertainment and things that aren't long lasting, right? It's just it's part of life, and so it's financial planning in many ways. Having that written plan and running the numbers and working with someone or doing it on your own can really help go a long way of sort of balancing those near-term expenses and sort of the rewarding yourself as well as achieving the long-term goals.
And it's interesting how you don't want to like sacrifice like living a good life and like to have money, because there's a story in a really old book. I'm pretty sure it's a book by Jim Rohn, but there's a story of some guy who just saved like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but was afraid of becoming poor. So he didn't spend a single penny. So the guy dies eventually, but he lived a poor life. So by saving the money and not using it, he ended up living the life he feared the most. Now, that's not to say go crazy and buy a big house and buy a fancy car, but there is this balance between, investing and just being able to spend some money on yourself and give yourself those rewards for all the hard work you're putting in.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that in terms of, because we've seen that a few times, right? And the vast majority of the people I work with are in their 30s and 40s, executives and business owners. But we do work with, a handful of retirees as well. And, it is an issue sometimes where people are so used to sort of, not spending on frivolous things. They've accumulated this nest egg. And it takes a mindset change to go from saving all that money and having a business or a job that gives you a steady paycheck, and then turning that nest egg into steady income. And I think that sometimes people are a little too conservative, and in those situations, quite a few situations, it's been my kind of job to say, hey, you have more than enough money, and you worked very hard up to this point. And the plan says that you can spend, X amount, and you're spending well below that. So let's kick it up a little bit, and you can enjoy things. But yeah, that is it's a first class problem, but it's a common thing that happens with people that save well.
And it's interesting you mentioned people being too conservative, because I think part of the issue is that we are on extremes. Like some people be too conservative, and then when you tell them, you could spend a little more, you're doing great, some of those same people can then go on the extreme side. So how can we not be extreme on one of the sides and just find that? Because you said like, plan on spending X amount. Like how do we figure out what X is and actually abide to it?
Yeah, I think that some of that goes to once there's different financial planning software, and you can kind of set this up in Excel for yourself if you want. And there's different apps that can kind of tell you if you have saved a certain amount, you can spend a certain amount. But you're right? There's sort of a tendency to, at least with certain people, that balance is difficult. And I think that recognizing what kind of person you are, and I think that's helpful, right? So for example, for a lot of people, if they have a steady paycheck and it goes into their checking account, they're going to spend the money, right? But if it's already spoken for and they have automatic deductions that go to various other accounts, then they're not going to spend that money. And so it's just knowing themselves and knowing that, okay, well, I've got to put this in an account that is harder to get to, for example, right? It's, in a tax deferred account, or, possibly in an illiquid investment. And it helps them, out of sight, kind of out of mind kind of thing. And, so that that way they don't spend it. And so, yeah, there's just different things that, different strategies and techniques that people can use, if they have that sort of bias towards, kind of spending everything they see, or, just kind of going all in one way or the other.
And that's a really great point too. I mean, there's just so many different financial softwares. I'm a big fan of using Excel. I just like using numbers on my side because I'm an Apple user. But this theme of knowing your numbers rather than just guessing and seeing that it works, like once you get the numbers down, it's just so much easier for you to quantify that. And I mean, what would you suggest for people who don't know their numbers? Like, how would you like build that mindset to like pay attention to numbers, and what are some of the key ones you would look at?
Yeah, and I recognize that people have a spectrum of quantitative inclination, right? And so I think that it's sort of you know if you aren't as good at sort of figuring things out, I think that's where people should build a team, right? So I think business, like just like a business owner builds their team, and in terms of their finance person and their chief technology officer and the sales team. I think that people should sort of build their personal life team, right? So whether that's to have this sort of concept of a personal board of directors, someone that you can talk to about various life issues. And, that's not just financial. It could be legal and emotional and all sorts of things. And so I think that having that board of directors can really help when it comes to looking at different issues. And, I will say that, a lot of times it's these big life events really that mean the most, right? And, some of these life events are momentous, and others are quite the opposite. People getting married, getting divorced, having kids, death in the family. I think that kind of all those different things, many of them are unplanned and out of the blue and extremely stressful. And I think that what financial planning can do a little bit is sort of do a little bit of the scenario analysis and say, okay, well, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. Because there's a financial aspect to many of those issues. And so I would just encourage people to build a team or to get help or to ask a friend or to work with an advisor. Because I think that, it's very helpful, particularly in the sort of life events. So.
Yeah, and I mean, those life events are just, no one really plans for that. It's an amazing point David brings up. I mean, just thinking about it, like, I feel like everyone could think of at least one example. You don't plan for those kinds of things, but they do happen. And just being able to anticipate, like, emotional responses to those things, like thinking about what kind of money you need to have in each of those scenarios. And if you aren't a numbers person, just like having that team behind you, those are just some of the different things that can really help you achieve success in finances from a personal level. And another thing that can help you guys as well is to follow David and his work. So I'm wondering, David, if you could share with us just some of the places where we can continue to follow your work and journey.
Sure. I do have a blog. It's planningtowealth.com. On the blog, there's different content and articles about, various financial planning topics, whether that's, getting ready to sell a business or different ways to cut on the cost of college for a family. A lot of free content there if people want to check it out. And if they have questions, they can contact me through the site as well.
David, thank you for sharing your website with us. We will have that in the show notes. But once again, it was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
It's great to chat with you too as well. Have a wonderful day.